So how do you make a conveyor belt inside 3dverse? In this scene, I have a cylinder and a conveyor belt, and I'd like my cylinder to move alongside my conveyor belt. The first thing to do would be to make the cylinder a rigid body. So rigid bodies are dynamic physics bodies, meaning they'll move during the simulation, and they're also affected by forces such as gravity. So to make it a rigid body, I'm going to have to give it a physics material, a rigid body, and some sort of geometry. So in our case, it makes sense to give it a cylinder geometry. The next thing to do would be to make sure that you have your debug lines enabled. This will allow you to make sure that your entities are well registered as physics bodies. You'll actually see their geometries. And it will also help you configure the geometries. So in our case, probably going to want to change the axis and also modify the height. So now we have a rigid body, and if I press play, it will just fall because of gravity. So the next thing to do would be to configure the conveyor belt. The conveyor belt won't be moving, so we can make it a static physics body, meaning it will have a physics material and some sort of geometry component. So in our case, a box geometry is fine. And now if I press play, it will actually collide with the conveyor belt. So finally, we want to make this cylinder, and any other rigid body for that matter, move alongside the conveyor belt whenever it's in contact with it. So what we'll need to do is modify these two attributes of the conveyor belt. Modify contact and contact velocity. If I make modify contact true, then contact velocity will be effective. And so what this will actually do is apply a velocity on the contact point of each rigid body that gets in contact with the conveyor belt. And the other thing to note is that contact velocity is in local space. So I can see that in local space, I want to make the contact velocity be alongside the y-axis. So I can change that. And now if I press play, I have a very slow conveyor belt, so I can just modify that. And there we go.